Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table. I'm your host, Dawn Deckman Mohler, and today we have our guest, Karen Lampert. Karen Lampert is with us today to discuss the important work that she has done with the Los Angeles County as an advocate with the Department of Human Resources. In our show today, she's going to explain a couple of her different titles and some of the departments that she worked in and some wonderful work that she's done on behalf of families. Karen currently lives in North Carolina with her husband and children. Welcome to our show today, Karen.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you as a guest today. This is an area that we have not had a chance to interview anybody with at this stage of our podcast shows. And I think, really today, at the end of the show, our takeaway is going to give some people some different ideas on how they can get involved with foster care, Big Brother, Big Sister, the local CASA organizations. And we're excited that you're going to share some true life stories that you have of being involved with the Los Angeles County and especially as an advocate with the Department of Human Resources. We're going to take a real quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we want to learn about how your career began with the Los Angeles County as an advocate with the Department of HR. So hang on, we'll be right back. Stand by. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. Our guest today is Karen Lampert. Karen, I'm so excited to learn about how your career began with the Los Angeles County. I know you were an advocate with the Department of Human Resources, and you've got some really great stories to share with us today. In this first segment, we'd love to hear about how your career began.
Well, Dawn, it is a funny story. I was working part-time doing a variety of teaching jobs, and my mother, who was currently at that time a county employee, said to me, "You need to get a full-time job." and sometimes we do need to listen to our mothers because she was very wise with that advice.
I love that.
She introduced me to a person named Renee Kaptain, who was actually the head DCSR at the Department of Health Services. And from that point of meeting Mr. Renee Kaptain, I went ahead and I complete the application process. And it is a long process for anyone who's gone through it. It takes about a year before you get hired. But I was first what they call a DCSR, which is a Department of Civil Service Representative for Health Services. And from there, I went to Department of Human Resources as HRA 3, which is also the equivalent to an advocate. In both jobs, my position was responsible for investigations of employee misconduct, discipline hearings, discipline letters. So because LA County has employees who are in the union, our employees obviously have a property right in their job. So when you take any kind of action against them, those employees get the right to appeal that action. So we have to give them, when we do an investigation and we conclude that the complaint or the allegations are actually true, we issue the employee a discipline letter outlining what policies they may have violated and what would be the appropriate remedy for those violations. The employee will serve his or her, say, suspension, or they may be reduced in rank, or they may even be terminated. That employee would then have the right to a hearing. It's a full evidentiary hearing in front of a hearing officer who's like a judge. And that hearing officer hears evidence and listens to witnesses. And then he or she makes a recommendation, which then goes before a 5-panel commission. We call it the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission is appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and they make the final determination if the plan will remain, or is it reduced, or is it completely eliminated. And so it's sort of a long process, but I know that people don't think that civil servants have any kind of oversight, but they actually do.
I did not know that.
They do have rules and regulations they must adhere to. And LA County, being a very large county, they have over 100,000 employees. And DHR Resources is hired out to some of the smaller departments and even a few big ones to do their what we call advocacy. So being an advocate means you're actually advocating for the management and for the constituents who voted for the Board of Supervisors to make sure that the employees are given the best service that they deserve. And they deserve the best because they are paying for this through their tax dollars.
Correct.
So through my career, I worked for Department of Mental Health, Department of Health Services, Department of Public Works, and DHR. And also there was a department which is no longer in existence, but it was a very important department, the Office of Affirmative Action Compliance. So in all those positions, pretty much I was doing investigations. That means interviewing witnesses, going to the facilities, looking at the location of where the allegations occurred, taking pictures sometimes, and then going through and doing the full evidentiary hearing.
Was there one out of the four that you mentioned that kept you busier than others for whatever reason?
Well, they all kept me busy, but I think working for DHR obviously probably was the busiest because we were sort of hired out to other departments to handle their advocacy. And I was also the person when I was with DHR who would review the discipline letters from the various departments. Before they issued that letter to the employee, I would look at it to make sure that there were no holes or gaps in the letter. Because sometimes there might be a new person writing the letter and they may not have sort of pinned down the actual violation properly. They may have the wrong policy in the letter. We also did a lot of training when I was at DHR. So I would go to the departments and tell them basically what we were looking for as far as when they do a discipline letter or when they do an investigation, what should they be looking for, what information would be the most benefit to the department. We would also try to make sure that supervisors and managers were not being vindictive, that everyone's being treated the same, and that they didn't have one set of rules for one group of employees and another set for another. So, for example, if we have one employee who may have an attendance problem, but the next employee is friends with the supervisor, and that person also has an attendance problem, that they are being treated the same, that not one person was being sort of dinged for the attendance and the other one wasn't. So we would also sort of make sure that people were getting the same treatment. So I would say, yes, I was very busy at DHR as an advocate, doing a variety of things, and it was really fulfilling. It was very fulfilling.
This is work that I'm really not familiar with. I know we are constituents. We vote in public servants that do services, but I would think that the training would be extremely important to be able to possibly curb any type of wrong allegations, nepotism or anything else, to make sure that these type of documents that would come your way would be rather clean rather than you having to research to see if there was any type of nepotism or things like that.
The training is very important. I have to say that the LA County system is very good about training. When we get new supervisors, they have training for new supervisors to help them understand how to document their employees' behavior, whether it's good or bad, because the supervisors and the managers have to also do what we call performance evaluations. Every year, they have to tell that employee how she or he is meeting expectations. Are they competent, which means they're meeting all their expectations? Are they above competent? And are they excellent? We want the employees to know where they sort of fall on the spectrum. And so we do have training for entry-level supervisors. There's ongoing training over any kind of EEOC issue, that would be discrimination, sexual harassment. There's also executive training. So as people move up in their careers, there's training for executives on how they need to manage the multiple groups that they are managing. And then everyday employees have training. They have training on their rules and regulations for their unique department. And also all the employees have training on the sexual harassment. They have training on anything that might have to do with discrimination. And so they make sure that the employees are constantly being brought up to speed on any new laws or new applications of laws and anything that may come up in their positions, in their jobs. And I don't know if many people know this, but LA County they cover a big, broad base of duties. They have the hospitals, the county hospitals.
Okay.
They have the mental health aspect, and they go into the jails. We have, the public defenders. We have our district attorneys. So we have public health. I mean, there are just so many departments. And so that's why we have so many employees. But LA County itself is so large. And the interesting thing is that DHR, which is Department of Human Resources, so we're like the Department of Human Resources over all the other departments, because each department has its own human resources, but we're the ones that sort of get into more of the, I'd say details, more of the higher level problems that human resources would have to deal with. And so that's why the advocates would be the ones who would go ahead and conduct the hearings. We were sort of the subject matter experts.
Okay.
And we would do consultations with other departments when they had a problem. They're saying, well, we're having a problem with this employee. What should we do? And we would be the ones that would go ahead and counsel them on how they should handle that employee. We will work in tandem with our county council, because we also have county council that helps to guide the various departments in these kind of situations.
So you were the subject matter expert, the SMEs, to support the other DHR locations around LA County. Was there ever situations where maybe there was a wrongful termination and the LA County was sued? Of course, there can always be a wrongful termination. This is the interesting thing. If someone was terminated and they went through the appeal process and say that the hearing officer made a recommendation, this person should be brought back because there really wasn't enough evidence to support a discharge. Mm-hmm. At that point, the department can do one or two things. The department can either put that employee back and do retroactive pay and benefits, or the department could write objections to the hearing officer's recommendation, and it could go back before the Civil Service Commission. The commissioners would read the objections, and then right there at the podium, the commissioners would ask each side questions, and then the commission at that point would render a final decision. If maybe they decided, just to say, for example, that person wasn't wrongfully terminated, but that then gives that, what we call appellant, that employee, the opportunity to then go to the Superior Court and file. And then they could go and file at the court. So they do have avenues if they believe it's been a wrongful termination. Whenever I came across a case that I thought the employee wasn't being treated fairly, I would contact the department and ask that department to reconsider the action that was taken. I always believe that you should be fair, and if you don't have the information, you just don't have the information. And you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, even though that wasn't the standard, it was just by preponderance of the evidence. I really wanted to make sure that if we were going to take adverse action against an employee, that we really had our facts and our witnesses lined up very well. You were a true advocate in that area, not just for LA County, but also for the citizens or the constituents or an employee.
Right. I didn't want an employee to ever get put in a bad situation.
Sure.
Just because maybe someone didn't like that person or there was some tension. But I had one case where this was a case of a supposed, I think she was I want to say she was a social worker. And she went to a home, and the person she was there to visit was in the shower. I think it was a foster mother. I can't really remember, but she was in the shower, and it was alleged that the social worker actually went in through the patio door and went into the person's home without announcing herself and without being invited in. And that person was terminated.
Well, that's a story I want to come back to. We're going to have to take a real quick break, Karen, but that's a cliffhanger in my opinion. So when we come back into our second segment, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that particular case and maybe a few of your other cases that you think that your audience here at the Captain's Table would be interested in. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. I'm your host, Dawn Deckman Mohler, and we have Karen Lampert with us. Karen is telling us a little bit about some of the stories that she was an advocate for. And in this segment, we'd like to hear more about them, Karen.
Yes, as I was saying, this was a very unusual case. The allegation was that the social worker had entered the home unannounced and through a patio door while the person who was to be visited was in the shower. And when I got the case, I had statements from the witnesses, but I always make sure that I contact the witnesses and I interview them at least 3 times before the hearing. When I went to contact the witnesses, there were no witnesses available. We could not reach them. One of my colleagues and I actually got in our car and drove to the addresses we had for the witnesses.
Goodness gracious.
And when we got there,
it could be a little dangerous.
Well, it's part of the job. They no longer live there. And we could not find anyone to substantiate this allegation. We were told there were witnesses who actually saw this social worker enter the home, but we had no witnesses. And so the day of the hearing arrived, and I had no witnesses. And the hearing officer, we did our preliminary saying our names and things of that nature. And right then and there, I said, Your Honor, for the record, the department would like to withdraw the discipline effective immediately. And so we actually just stopped it right there. And that's something that is not normally done, but there's no way we could go forward with that hearing. The person was given, I believe, a 30-day suspension. So that means that she was suspended for 30 days without pay.
Okay.
And I told the department we could not substantiate that. And they went ahead and reduced that just to a written warning. So she was given her money back, and it was a written warning. And in the MOU we have with the union, after 2 years, if they don't have any other discipline, that written warning is removed from their record.
Well, that is good to hear the checks and balances within the system, and that there are people like you that are advocates for both parties.
Yes, I definitely, like I said, I like to be fair. And we have, there are other cases that I have that are interesting. We had one case with the Parks and Recreation, where we had a supervisor who discriminated against a pregnant student worker. And that was sort of sad because this was out in Lancaster in the area, a little bit on the side where they have few opportunities for young people. So this was a sort of important job for this young lady. She was, I believe, sort of like 7 or 8 months pregnant. She was quite pregnant, but she wanted to have this summer job, and she felt like she could do the work. And the supervisor was not happy that she was in the program and basically let her go. And
without a warning or without any?
Without a warning. And as a student worker, student workers are just temporary employees. So, but for this young lady, it was an important job. And she also was upset that one of the young lady's friends had made mention that that wasn't fair. So she actually released both of these 2 workers. And I had to drive out to Lancaster, I think about 4 times to interview, not the pregnant young lady, but the friend, because he was also let go. So I did interview him about 3 times, and what we call the decision maker, the person who made the decision to give the supervisor a suspension. It was an 8-day suspension. This was an interesting case in the sense that the supervisor, in her case in chief, brought forth another manager who I did not know, who was not named in the letter, to come testify about what this young man had said. And it contradicted what I had as far as his testimony. He had already testified.
Right.
At that point, I actually put myself on the stand.
So that wasn't normal?
That was not normal. But I knew I could do it because I saw one of my colleagues do the same thing when his case went a little bit off the rails.
Okay.
So I put myself on the stand as to my conversation with this young man and what was said and what was not said. And then we followed that up with a phone call to that young man later on in the hearing for him to confirm what I had testified to. So that's one of those weird cases that sort of you think you're like, I became my own witness. But it worked out because we were successful in maintaining her suspension on her record.
Okay, so of course the young lady didn't come back to work who was pregnant, but the manager that let her and the young man go had a suspension.
Her suspension stayed on her record.
Had some disciplinary action.
Yes. So sometimes those things happen. It was just an interesting situation where I had to put myself on the stand. And I think I would say a funny case that I had was against Mr. Kaptain, who's the man who hired me, Renee Kaptain. And so we were on opposite ends. At this point, Mr. Kaptain had retired from the county, and he was representing employees. So we get to the hearing, and we had talked on the phone, but he's like, "How are you doing, Karen?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing great, Mr. Kaptain." And we were going up against each other, and it was just interesting because he had trained me. And
so what was the case, Karen? Let me make sure I understand. What was this case with Mr. Kaptain?
This was a case from Health Services, Department of Health Services. And this was a young man who was hired to go and train on fire safety.
Okay.
So he's supposed to go to different hospital facilities and train on fire safety and sort of be the go-to person when there was a question about fire safety.
Okay.
This interesting young man was being discharged because the allegation was that he was not doing the training, that he was leaving the training materials with security guards, and that they would do the trainings. They would show the films, and they would give out the handouts.
Oh, my goodness.
I know, this is hysterical. He was also working at 2 community colleges. At the same time, he was supposed to be doing this training. Now, this training was a full-time job.
Oh, my gosh.
And anytime an employee has an outside job, they're required to complete an outside employment form. And they're not supposed to work over a certain number of hours. Well,
and then he had 2 jobs, not just one.
He had 2 jobs, and you can see it on the website. They had his name as one of their professors, and so it was interesting. I don't know why Mr. Kaptain took the case, but he did. We were able to prove that the guy was not there. We had the security guy, one of the security guards, come forth and indicate that yes, he was told to push the button to start the movie, and he was told to give out the handouts. We were also able to get testimony from one of the community colleges that he taught at as to what his hours were and what his attendance record was. Was he there during those times? And so, but it was just funny because I think at one point when I think Mr. Kaptain was doing cross-examination, he said, "Oh, this is so much fun." And he gave me a little smirk. And one of the things that some of the advocates do in the hearing, they try to get the other side upset. And they do little things to try to get people a little bit heated. Once a person gets heated in these hearings, they become ineffective.
Yeah.
And it's usually men with men, sometimes men with women, but usually men with men. I am blessed with the ability to completely shut out that kind of nonsense and just stay focused on the case at hand. So I don't get easily offended. I've had people say crazy things to me, insult me, insult my intelligence.
You're a professional.
And I just go with it. I just smile and I just go with it because my thing is I'm going to win this case. So long story short, I did prevail, and Mr. Kaptain said something to the effect of, well, the student has now, upseated the teacher. I said, yes, Mr. Kaptain, I have. And so it was just funny that I came across. He was just a great guy to work for, and he taught me well. I guess he taught me a little too well.
So let me ask you, let me kind of go back to Mr. Kaptain. So how was he involved in this particular research that you had to do with the young man that did the fire safety that was working at 2 junior colleges?
He was representing him.
I wanted to make sure I understood. He was representing the young man, and you were up against each other. So what happened? Listen, the young man was, he was had involved. He was doing all kinds of things, trying to get away with 3 different, salaries. But whatever happened with his position as the fire safety manager?
He was discharged, and I assume he went on and continued with his other profession, his other teaching. But he was terminated because, 1, he wasn't doing the job, and 2, he didn't even let us know he had outside employment.
And so you had to hire another person to replace him at some point in time. So he was discharged.
And I'm sure that they had someone else, because he had already been terminated. So they already had someone else filling that position. They may have just been sitting on the item temporarily until that position was completely free and he wouldn't be coming back.
Well, do you have another maybe least favorite or favorite case study that you worked on for this segment?
Yes, I do. This was one of my last cases before I left the department. And this case and another case actually really touched my heart. This last case was about a social worker who made inappropriate propositions to she's called a dependent minor. At the time when I met her, she was called an independent minor, meaning she was over 18. When this violations occurred, it started when she was 17.
Okay.
So a 17-year-old girl who had been in foster care since she was 4. And that's sad in and of itself. This is a situation where her parents and her family let her down completely. So she was in foster care. She was assigned a new social worker right before her 18th birthday. And this social worker took her out to dinner and just was casually asking her, it was a female social worker, asking her, well, what are you going to do for your birthday? And this young lady was saying, I'm going to go out with my friends and we're going to have ice cream or whatever she said. Mm-hmm. And the social worker then proceeded to say, well, my husband and I are having trouble having children. And would you be interested in having a baby for us?
Oh my gosh,
we will
Karen.
Give you, I kid you not, we will give you an apartment. We'll help, your boyfriend get a job. We'll give you a car. And, my husband says he really wants a child. And this 17-year-old child, when I spoke to her and I interviewed her, he said, I couldn't believe this woman was saying this to me. I'm a kid. Why is she telling me these things and asking me these things?
So did she immediately see this as a red flag and go to authorities like yourself or your division? How did you find out about the story?
Well, more things occurred.
Okay.
When the little girl, and I call her little girl,
yeah.
but she was a very sweet child. When she graduated from high school and before she was going to go to college, there was a summer gap. And she couldn't stay at the group home because she was 18. And so she had to go somewhere for the summer. And her grandmother was going to take her in, and they had a meeting. I forgot the name of the meeting, but it's a meeting where you're planning out how things are going to go. And the grandmother was going to take her for the summer, and then she was going to live on campus and go to college. When the young girl was planning to move out of the group home, the group home manager said, oh, do you want me to get your social worker to help you? And she said, no, that social worker makes me feel uncomfortable. And that started the conversation. I said, what do you mean?
I see.
Well, come to find out, there were a couple other instances where the social worker even brought her husband around to sort of check out this young girl.
Mm-hmm. When she was 17 and a half, before she aged out of the system?
At 18, she brought the husband around on at least two occasions. There may have been more.
Okay.
But we knew about 2 occasions. One occasion where they were having the meeting with the grandmother, and then the girl had to get back home to the group home. The social worker drove back the girl to her home, and then the husband drove both of them to the girl's group home.
Okay.
And the husband gave her his car. I believe he drove a cab, and he gave the young girl his business card and said, if you ever need a ride, give me a call, and told her she was very pretty. Oh. And I know, very creepy. And then the social worker told the young girl to be nice to the husband. That was one occasion. Another occasion, the social worker and the husband stopped by the group home, and the husband told the young girl how pretty she was. Well,
this is, this is such a red flag for trafficking, yes. Even trafficking.
Exactly.
You don't know what's really going on. So continue with the story.
So the young girl basically told the group home manager what had occurred. And then that group home manager contacted the Department of Children and Family Services to report the social worker. So the social worker was terminated. And then I got the case.
Okay.
And at first I looking at the case, and it said something doesn't sound right about this case. And I went ahead and met with one of the managers over the group that was over this young girl's case. And I asked them, did they report this to the police? And did they also report this to the licensing board that gave the social worker her license? Because if she's doing this kind of thing, she shouldn't be a social worker.
Yes.
No, it sort of fell through the cracks, and unfortunately, no one had reported it to the police, and I was very disappointed by that. But I did meet with the young girl on at least 5 occasions. I went to her school and met with her on campus. She was a lovely child, had a tough life, but was looking forward to a brighter future, and prepared her to be a witness against this social worker. And she was actually just basically, she and my decision maker were the only two witnesses. And prepped her, and she did a great job. She was on the stand for 5 hours.
Oh, that's a lot, Karen. That really is. And for that poor child to have to go through everything that she did. And in the end, of course, you mentioned the social worker, was let go. We're going to actually take a real quick break, Karen. These stories are really amazing. And I want to come back and listen to you about how these stories changed your own life and your family. Okay? We'll be right back. Stand by. Welcome back to the Captain's Table. I'm your host, Dawn Deckman Mohler, and we have Karen Lampert, who's really sharing some insightful information about being involved as a advocate for the Los Angeles County Human Resources Department. Karen, in this final segment, share with us about, really how this changed your life personally and your family.
Well, we were successful in maintaining the discharge of that social worker, but what really bothered me about this case, besides the obvious sex trafficking and things of that nature, when he went before the Civil Service Commission, the opposing counsel was talking about how this young girl was a bad girl because she had been moved to various group homes. And I took huge offense to that because and I said this to the commissioners, she's not a bad girl. She's a girl in a bad situation. The adults have failed her, and we're holding her responsible for their failures. And that's unfair. And foster kids, a lot of times that's what happens. They get a negative label put on them. They have not done anything. They're just innocent victims of stuff that occurred from their parents. This young lady, when she was 4 years old, her mother almost beat her to death. That's how she got into foster care. It wasn't anything she did.
Yeah,
her parents got up, they went to jail, whatever, but that family was a bad family. And so she got the stigma of their mess.
Yes.
And that's what happens with kids who are in the foster care system. It breaks my heart to see young kids in this country sort of being thrown away. Oh, that's a bad kid. That's a kid with problems. We all have problems. But the thing is, our God tells us to take care of widows and orphans. We're supposed to. And we have children in foster care because they don't have anyone to love them, to guide them, or to help them. I'm sorry. So it's important that we all step up and help these children. So my husband and I, we have, he has 2 children from a previous marriage. My stepkids grew up and we raised them together. And then I told him that the Lord touched my heart to adopt. And so we did. So now we have 3 young children. So we'll just say 7, 6, and 4. And we all from the same family. We got them at birth. And it's, we have our challenges like every other family. Our kids, some days my kids drive me crazy, but I thank God that we're all here together. And we made the decision to move out of California and move to a place that was a little bit more traditional because we just wanted our kids to have a really good foundation and a good life. And we're in North Carolina. It's very family friendly. Everything is about family here. It's so interesting. When we moved here, we were used to California meeting new people, and the first thing they would ask you is, what do you do for a living in California?
So true.
Here in North Carolina, they say, well, what church do you go to? That's the question they ask. We could ask that question. And we're in a small knit community, so when we tell them the name of our church, they're like, oh, yeah, we know that church. So it's really interesting. But we live in a really small community, and my kids are making great friends. They go to a Christian school that's from kindergarten to 12th grade, so they have lifelong friends they're making. And one of the things I shared with you earlier, Dawn, is that it's so nice in our neighborhood. We see young boys who range from, I would say, 9 to 12 years old, walking down the street with their fishing poles.
I love that.
And that's something that we're used to. It's sort of funny. And we had a big party for our 2 girls because their birthdays are close together. It was just so nice. We invited families, not just, kids. Everybody we invited had at least 2 children, and we invited families. And so it was nice that we had something for each member, each age group of kids to play with and to enjoy at our little birthday party. But the thing is, we need to think about kids who are in the system. And I really encourage people to, if you can't foster, if you can't adopt, then maybe you can be a mentor. They have LA County through the Department of Children and Family Services. You can be a mentor. Say if you're a retiree, you can advocate at their school for certain educational needs that child may have, or just to be a friend to a young person who's in that situation. At the end of the day, every human being just wants to be loved. And that is it. And these kids have been thrown away, and they just want to be loved like everyone else. They just want a normal household and people who care about them. And if we as a society really want to improve our country, we have got to take care of these children. They are our future. And if we don't, we're going to get more people in jail, more people committing suicide, more people being sex trafficked, more people having early pregnancy. If we don't step up and do what we should be doing the hard work, we're not going to get the good results that we want as a country. And I firmly believe that. Without us helping these kids, we are condemning them to horrible lives. We've got to do better. And so it was this case of the young lady in particular that just broke my heart, because she said to me, why is this woman telling me these things? I'm a kid. And she was a kid. 17, 18, you're still a kid. We all have to remember, when we were 18, we were all idiots. So we're still kids at 18. But for her to be put in this situation where she had more morals and more integrity than her own social worker, I mean, it showed me she had a lot of strength in her. And for people to throw that young lady away and think she's a bad girl, no, she's a girl who was put in a bad situation. And any of us put in a bad situation would not act our normal selves. We might act a little different, but we have to think about these kids. And here in North Carolina, we have different agencies. I encourage people, if you don't know, if you're not in LA County, but you want to get involved in this area, you go to your state, and they usually have some kind of like foster care authority. You can get the information from that one. Here in North Carolina, they have Foster Family Alliance.
Okay.
And they have also Fostering North Carolina. But help out any way you can. I just recently met a foster mother here in North Carolina, and she is, I believe, the second home for this little boy. He's 3 years old. And it breaks my heart because she's saying she may not be able to keep him. She's had him for a year. And it broke my heart because I realized if she can't keep this little boy who's been with her for a year, and he moves to another family, he would probably be destroyed, in the sense that he's already attached to her. That's to him, this is his mother. He's 3 years old. She was saying she may have to give him to another family because she needs help with services. I encourage people, if you are someone who can help a foster parent with babysitting or anything, maybe just giving them a night off. They call it respite care, because that's what I'm trying to offer to this lady, where she needs somebody to help, another pair of hands to help her. So our family is trying to step in to help her, because I told her if this little boy is removed from her, I don't see how he's going to thrive, because he's already attached to her, and he's only 3. And you can't just keep moving these children around. They're human beings. They have to have that one person that they're connected to in life to feel safe and secure. So she has said she needed help. My family, we're trying to help her out. I've offered to help her take him to some of his therapies. My husband said, well, maybe we can start helping her on Fridays, and our kids can play with him and help him out. But we definitely, as a community, especially those of you who really have a heart for children, you please, if nothing else, please try to help and step in. We have too many children in the United States in foster care. It's really a shame. It's a shame.
And Karen,
and if you're
no, I was going to say, and almost 30 years ago, I got involved as a mentor with the foster care program in the state of Oklahoma, and now I'm third generation Nana Dawn. So The foster girl that I was with, she was 17 when I started mentoring her through CASA. And she had a little girl, and her little girl is married now and has a 8-month-old baby. So I'm a third generation involved with, being a mentor to one young lady, and it's a big part of my life. There's so much opportunity out there for people that want to get involved with children, and I am so proud of you and what you've done in your life, Karen, and your husband and your family in North Carolina going down with fishing poles. and it's summertime, and I mean, you have a wonderful story. I say to you, our audience, get involved. There's a call to action with this podcast today. Reach out to your local CASA organization, your foster care, your big brother, big sisters organizations, the YMCA, the YWCA. Reach out and get involved if you've got the time. I know, the older we get, we've got grandkids in our own lives, but there's so many children that do need our assistance and our love. Right, Karen?
That is true. And also, it's good if your children can help reach out. My children with the little 3-year-old boy I was mentioning, I brought him to our home and he spent the day. And yes, he had some issues. And I just told my children, guess what? We all have issues. We just have to be very compassionate and loving. And once he feels safe and secure, I'm sure some of those issues will dissipate. But we have to be the best version of ourselves.
I love that, Karen.
And so it's important for everyone to think about getting involved. And I tell my children that they should say every morning, two things. What can I do to strengthen our family? And when I say family, I'm usually talking about our immediate family, but I mean, what about our whole family as Americans? And who can we serve? And if we start our days off like that, we can help these children to be vibrant members of society instead of filling them in our jails or even in our morgues. We've got to help the children. We've got to.
Karen, thank you so much. Audience, I hope you're hearing her loud and clear. We sure appreciate you being on the Captain's Table podcast show today. Listeners, please follow us on our Facebook page, The Captain's Table, and our YouTube site. Our website is under construction. It'll be up and rolling soon. But Karen Lampert, thank you so much. It was just a delight to visit with you today. And our audience, thank you for joining. And you all have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.